Jewish Education in Media is pleased to present L'Chaim, a program that highlights the people, issues, and events of importance to the Jewish community. Now here is your host, Rabbi Mark Golub.
I'm Mark Golub, and there are many remarkable people, men and women, outside the Jewish community who feel passionately about the state of Israel. And on this edition of L'Chaim, I have the wonderful opportunity to introduce you to a woman who has impressed me enormously. She blew me away when I had the chance to speak to her on an edition of In the News. If you haven't met her or seen her or read her outstanding pieces in the Jerusalem Post, Wall Street Journal, Huffington Post, Tablet, just to name a few of the many, many news sources which have published her opinion pieces. If you haven't met her before, you're in for a real treat. It's my distinct pleasure to introduce you to Chloé Valdary, Director of Partnerships and Outreach at Jersualem U. One word about Chloé's impressive background. Chloé's a graduate of the University of New Orleans with a major in international studies. And while a student there, she founded a pro-Israel student group called Allies of Israel. Chloé served as an intern for Bret Stephens at the Wall Street Journal. And for outstanding work and writing, Chloé was named by the Allgemeiner as one of the top 100 people positively affecting Jewish life today. And again, Chloé is currently with Jersualem U, which is a group dedicated to strengthening young Jews' connection to Judaism and to Israel, and does so through an amazing array of online courses and wonderful, powerful films, many of which you can see on JBS. And it is, again, you blew me away. You are lovely, you're bright, you're intelligent, you're articulate. It's an honor for me to have you at this table. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
So first I want to know a little bit more about you,
Okay.
and then we'll talk about your work. So you grew up where?
I was born and raised in New Orleans.
Siblings or no?
Yes, I have 4 sisters.
You have 4 siblings. All of you were in New Orleans growing up?
Yes.
Okay. And what's your home like? First of all, what's your home like religiously, and what's your home like in general?
So I grew up in a very unique Christian family that was actually steeped in Jewish culture. As a Christian, I grew up observing Shabbat and keeping kosher style and keeping the holy days.
This is amazing.
Yes.
But what does it mean that you grew up observing Shabbat in your parents' home?
It means that, for example, on Friday nights we would always have Bible study, and on Saturdays we would go to church services. And
Not Sunday?
Not Sunday, Saturday. And also, for example, with regard to the holy days, for Sukkot, most Jews, when they observe Sukkot, they might build a sukkah outside of their homes, but my parents decided to do a little twist on the scriptures, and we actually ended up going to Florida to stay in condos for 7 days because those were our temporary dwelling places. So
Your parents were very creative?
yes, they were.
That's lovely. Those are good, nice memories for you?
Yes, absolutely, yes.
I gather from what I've read about you that it wasn't simply that you had an interesting home religiously, but there was an appreciation of Jewish. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I think so. I think that was in part a product of my father's influence. My father introduced me to Jewish literature, especially in high school, where I discovered Leon Uris when I was 15 years old. So I read all of his books throughout high school.
Began with Exodus?
Beginning with Mila 18, actually.
Mila 18. Mila 18.
And then eventually Exodus, senior year in high school. So that had a very big influence on my life. I also was a part of the Hebrew Culture Club in high school. There happened to be one. I don't know why, but I was a part
Which
of that
high
as
school
well.
is this?
Benjamin Franklin High, the best high school in all of Louisiana.
Very lovely. So there you are in the Hebrew class, your Hebrew, what was it called?
Hebrew
Club?
Culture Club, yes.
Hebrew Culture Club.
Yes.
You're reading Leon Uris.
Yes.
You're gaining an appreciation for what Jewish is and also what Israel is, yes?
Yes.
Okay. Did you visit Israel?
Not in high school, no.
When did you first go?
In 2013.
Under what circumstances?
It was a sophomore year in college. It was after I had given a speech at my university about Israel and about growing anti-Semitism. And actually, AIPAC found that speech, found the video of that speech, and first invited me to their policy conference, and then invited me to attend one of their trips.
What was the essence of what you said?
The essence of what I said was that anti-Semitism was resurfacing, again, especially in Europe, and we as responsible individuals needed to address that and raise awareness about it, because it would be a tragedy for such a phenomenon to resurface in our generation.
Okay, Chloe, I ask this with all seriousness.
Yeah.
Where does that sensitivity in you come from? Most people your age at that time, it just it's not something that occurs to them, and even if they see it or trip over it, it doesn't move them as it moved you. Where does that come from in you, do you think?
It's a great question. I'm not exactly sure. I think that because my identity was shaped and formed at the intersection of two cultures, Christianity and Judaism, that the Jewish people and Israel remains a part of my identity personally, even though I'm not Jewish. And so I think that my future and my destiny is inextricably linked to this great story. So that's probably the greatest source of why I was so moved to respond.
You gave your father some credit a moment ago.
I did, yes.
What is he like?
He's quite intellectual. I think we've had a lot of intellectual conversations growing up. He's also very much geopolitically minded, so we always had conversations about countries and nations, which is probably one of the reasons why I majored in international studies at the University of New Orleans. So.
Are you're one of five, did you say?
Yeah.
Are your other siblings as interested in geopolitical stuff or Israel as you are?
My sisters are interested in many things, and things which are not, I think, stereotypical for a random average family in New Orleans to be interested in. But I think I'm the only one who's really dedicated their life to Israel in this particular context. My younger sister is actually interested in South Korea and affairs with East Asia, but I'm the only person who's like really into Israel.
Okay. You know what you just said was you feel you've dedicated your life to Israel. So let's move there now in terms of, I meet an awful lot of people at this table.
Okay.
I rarely get that line. I have dedicated my life to Israel. So for all the people who are watching you all over America, what's that mean?
Yeah.
What's it mean to you? I've dedicated my life to Israel.
It's a great question. I think that I just appreciate the great story of the Jewish people and everything that the Jewish people have been through in terms of persecution and oppression, and the distance they have traveled as a people in terms of reestablishing Israel. And I think that that entire experience actually can teach the human race a lot of lessons in terms of how to overcome seemingly insurmountable odds and setbacks that we encounter on a regular basis, which is a part of the human experience. And so when I say that I'm dedicating my life to telling the story of Israel, I don't mean that in a parochial way. I think that's very conducive for the enrichment of all of mankind. So that's what I think I mean when I say that.
Okay, I want to push you a little bit further.
Okay.
Okay? What I hear is why you appreciate Israel.
Yeah.
I don't know what it means to you to dedicate my life.
Okay.
That sounds like I'm going to do for Israel.
Well, yes, I think that is what I have. I think I've decided to try to tell the story of Israel in a way that it hasn't been told before to my generation, and that's one of the reasons why I'm at Jersualem U, and that's one of the reasons why I'm able to create the content that I create, because I think that unfortunately, for whatever reasons that exist, we have failed to tell the story of Israel in an empowering and an enchanting way that can actually move my generation.
I think you're absolutely right. You said you want to tell the story in a way that it has not been told to young people.
Yes.
Take your time.
Yeah.
I want to know what you think. I want to hear what you think the way is the story is told.
Okay.
Then I want you to tell me how you think it should be told.
Okay. I think today, and I did a great deal of research on this when I was at the Journal with Brett Stevens, I think today the story is being told in a very myopic way. I think that when people when people interact with Israel, or their first association with Israel or with Israelis is in a very political way, in a political paradigm. I think the question that most people begin with in the pro-Israel community is how can I get my peers or my audience to quote unquote pick Israel's side in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. And so this political paradigm is actually rather stifling. I don't think it's conducive to where we want to be, and I think the first step in changing that, and the way I want to tell the story is, people have to understand that they need to interact with Israelis as human beings, first and foremost. Human beings who laugh and love and hurt and cry and cope and struggle and strive, and really trying to make the point that Israelis are not political abstractions in an abstract world. And to, I think the more that we interact with Israelis as human beings and as people we can relate to, we do so automatically from a place of compassion and from a place of love, which I think is more productive than the conversation and the noise that has been going on today.
So for you, it's not about conflict. It's about
Correct.
who these people are as people.
Correct.
That's beautiful. Now come back to, by the way, I didn't let you finish the story.
Okay.
Your first trip to Israel.
Yes.
You went when you were in college?
Yes.
Okay.
I
What
was
was
a
that?
sophomore.
And did APAC facilitate that?
Yes.
What did you do on that trip?
Well, it was a great trip. It was called the Campus Allies Mission Trip to Israel, and it was with leaders from different universities all over the country. And we did, I guess, whatever you first do when you go to Israel. You see all the sites. You go to all of the famous places. You have Shabbat of a lifetime in Jerusalem for the first time, which was actually an incredible experience. A lot of the students on this trip were actually politically opposed to each other, and I think they did that on purpose. Like half of the trip was like Democrats and half were Republicans.
Really?
But I can't tell you the amount of love that was actually cultivated between these two groups of people, which was a really moving experience to be a part of.
Do you think there was any movement of opinion among either side or either group?
I think so. I mean, I think it was less important, though, whether or not there was any movement, and more the important part was really seeing the human being in the other, even as you disagreed with him or her. I think that was definitely an outcome of that trip, which I think is important.
This was roughly how many years ago?
4 years.
So it's not that long ago.
Yeah.
Okay. I want to see if you can find for me what it felt like inside you.
Okay.
You're in Israel for the first time.
Yeah.
You've heard it, you've known it, you've read it. Now you're there.
Yeah.
What was different than you expected, or what was the reality which you only learned, no matter how much you thought you knew?
Yeah.
You learned by going and being. Can you touch in any way what it was you learned, what you felt?
I think I can certainly say that every time, actually, I go back to Israel, there's some weird euphoric energy in the air, especially in Jerusalem, that I always encounter, that's sort of indescribable, but also very familiar at the same time. There's this air of enchantment, I think, that I experienced, which I don't know if that's very palpable, but that is the term that I think would describe, especially after experiencing Shabbat of a lifetime, in part because the group that I was with, for some reason, was very musical. There were a lot of young people on my trip that could sing, and could sing very well, and they were teaching the hosts for Shabbat our songs from America, and it was one of the most incredible experiences, and that contributed to this feeling of enchantment, but I think also more concretely the feeling of the spirit of possible, like anything is possible, So that's how I would sum up that feeling.
That is wonderful. Every time you speak, you give a phrase I want to understand more. They taught our songs, you said.
Yes.
Okay. One of the things that I'm imagining people are thinking to themselves is, you're an African American.
Yes.
You're not Jewish.
Correct.
You have a powerful feel for Jewish.
Yes.
You have a love of Israel. But you understand, a Jew gets off the plane at Ben Gurion Airport. You hear this universally. You get off the plane, you step on the ground, it's like coming home in some way.
Yes.
My imagination is, it was a powerful experience for you. I want to know if any of that sense that a Jew has I'm stepping off the plane. I'm home. I'm imagining that is not necessarily what you felt.
I don't think I necessarily felt that I was home, but I think that Israel represents, in a way, the epicenter of humanity. So there was something very familiar about it, not in the same way that a Jew experiences his or her homeland for the first time, but in a way that I think all of humanity can recognize that there's something special and powerful, just in terms of the way Israel has shaped all of civilization.
Chloe, as a Christian, did going to Jerusalem mean something to you as a Christian?
In a different way than mainstream Christianity. And truth be told, I think that I'm closer personally to the Jewish aspect of my upbringing than I am per se to the Christian aspect. I remember when I was on the trip and a lot of the people were visiting the various cathedrals and stuff, and I was like, I just want to go to the Western Wall at this point. But no, I think it's interesting from a historical perspective. But
Yes.
But as someone who is in love with Jewish philosophy, just personally, and Jewish thought, I think I was more moved by the Jewish aspects, believe it or not. And I can only imagine your follow-up question to that. So.
You probably can. And, I forgot I was going to ask this of you.
Okay.
What I mean I forgot is, I'm thinking about you for a couple of days, looking forward to this very, very much. And I'm thinking to myself, what do I want to talk to Chloe about?
Okay.
And I didn't remember that I might want to ask you this question.
Okay.
But it's so obvious.
I'm bracing myself.
Okay, yes, you're a wise woman. So do you ever say to yourself, I should become a Jew?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Casually sometimes.
Only casually.
Yeah, I think in a former.
The people say to you, by the way, oh, you're so Jewish, Chloe.
Yes, they do say that.
Oh,
all the time.
All the time.
All the time.
But
yes.
I'm asking you in terms of your soul and who you are. Do you ever say to yourself, I want to be a Jew?
I've sometimes considered it, but lately no.
Because?
I'm just more interested in this interesting paradox of a non-Jewish person being fascinated by Jewish philosophy. I think that's more interesting, actually.
And you also occupy a very interesting place because of it.
Yeah.
Yes. Incidentally, if you did decide to become a Jew,
yes,
would it upset your mother and father?
I don't know if I would use the term upset. They'll probably be disappointed a bit.
Because they want
want
you where you are.
You know?
Okay.
They're Christians, but
Okay.
I think that they would. I don't know what they would think, but I think that my father actually. I got my impulse for intellectual curiosity from my father, which I like to say is my Achilles heel and my greatest asset. So I think that he would understand it on some level.
I understand too. And what about the fact that were you the only African American on this APEC trip?
No, it was like 50%.
Really?
African American, yeah.
And then there was there also a large percentage of non-Jews on the trip?
The entire trip was non-Jewish.
Ah.
Yeah, it was a non-Jewish trip.
Where were they people from?
All over the country.
Like?
All over the country. These were presidents, in many cases, of like their student governments, because it was a campus leaders trip.
I see. Mm-hmm. And very often APEC tries to find leaders who might not yet understand what Israel is or feel terribly supportive in the hope that living it, seeing it, breathing it will just broaden one's orientation.
Right.
As you remember the people you were with, were there people there who came with a negative view of Israel, and to some degree or another, their eyes, they didn't leave with the same orientation they came with?
I don't recall anyone having a negative orientation from the beginning or from the onset. I think all of them went to policy conference beforehand, so they had some idea of what they were getting into, but I don't think that they were necessarily as immersed in, for example, the literature that has shaped the Jewish world, or they weren't immersed in the community in any way, shape, or form. So I think that still means that there was an impact made post-travel.
That was your first trip. What's your second?
My second trip was with camera in that summer. The summer of 2013.
You were a busy lady.
Yes, yes.
What was that like?
I think it was more lecture-based, less sightseeing, but it was good. It was educational. I really don't remember it that much, if
Fair
I'm being
enough.
honest.
Third trip.
Third trip was with ZOA. You can see there's a pattern here. Yes, third trip was with ZOA, and I think it was one of my favorite trips because I went to Judea and Samaria for the first time, and I went to, I saw Shiloh, and I saw many places where a lot of things have happened in the ancient Jewish world, which I was appreciative to see. And it was much more religious, I think, much more based on the text. But also just, I think it's important to see how a space becomes sacred for a people and understanding the shaping of that people's identity.
Mm-hmm. So there has been a long history between the Jewish community of America and the African American community. Mm-hmm. And there was a time, and you've written about the arc of America. You've written, basically, it's bigger than Jewish or African American. But I saw a piece you did, and you're talking about the civil rights movement and Martin Luther King and the Jewish involvement. And that's the era I grew up in. And my image is that the Jew and the African American are in this together. That's how I grow up. Okay. My hero, which I've talked about often on L'chaim, my hero was Jackie Robinson. Okay. My hero was Jackie Robinson before I knew he was African American. Okay. Then I found out he was African American. Changed my whole view of life. And again, this feeling of I'm in this together. And I was very, very lucky. I got a chance to meet him and know him, and got a chance to have his wife on L'chaim.
Oh, very nice.
And everybody has their own heroes in life. He was one of my personal heroes. There's a feeling inside the Jewish community that at some point, the African American community forgot how the Jew was walking with the African American in the civil rights movement. It was Martin Luther King, and it was Abraham Joshua Heschel. There were Christians there as well. But Heschel and Lelyveld and Borowitz, they were all there. And Lelyveld's getting his head cracked in. And the Jew was in the forefront, he felt, of fighting for the rights of African Americans against whatever slavery still meant. And segregation, horrific segregation. And, it's still in my lifetime, African American blacks were being lynched in the South. When my wife and I would go to the South, there were the white drinking fountains and the black drinking fountains. This is in our lifetime. And the Jewish community felt it was in a brotherhood. James Foreman was somebody I had enormous respect for and who was on L'chaim. Way back in whatever era that was. It seemed like ancient history now. And then there was a feeling that at some point along the way, the African American community abandoned the tie to the Jewish community. And there has been instead a certain criticism of Israel, anger at Jews. So I've described something for you.
Yes.
I want you to just talk about it from your perspective.
Okay.
I want to know how you feel about it, how you've lived it, and what would you say to the Jewish community about where you feel, where Chloé Valdary feels now, African American Jewish relations stand in the United States?
That's a big one. Listen, I think that actually, if you look at Black history and Black political history, there's always been two broad paradigms through which Black political leaders have seen the world. And one paradigm is really informed by Dr. King, and the other paradigm is informed by Malcolm X pre-Mecca. And obviously Dr. King's paradigm sees America as an incredible dream, an incredible vision, and requires Americans to live up to that vision and to that dream. Whereas the other paradigm sees America as sort of a Western original sinner that can do no good, and therefore is a part of a larger Western society that can do no good. And into that mix Israel belongs and is a part of. And I think that that has always existed in the black community, these two factions, these two different ways of viewing the world. And even during the civil rights movement, that existed, that second alternative way of viewing things. And I think that what we're seeing today with the rise of certain groups, that is merely a continuation of what has always been.
It's not new.
It's not new. It's not new. And I think that actually the majority of the African American community is religious, is spiritual, is informed by an understanding of Torah, and especially as a lexicon that informs the way we see the world, and I think is pro-Israel. But I think that what the Jewish community is witnessing is the vocal and the visibility of certain anti-Israel groups that happen to be in the black community, but again, are really just the current manifestation of what has already existed. Mm-hmm. I'm not too concerned about the relationship. I think that there are challenges, obviously, that exist that the Jewish community and the black community can confront together. But I'm not too concerned, in part because I know the ideology of the anti-Israel groups that exist. I don't think they're sustainable, in part because I think they're rooted ultimately in a narrative of victimhood and crisis as opposed to empowerment and opportunity. And I think that is antithetical to the spirit of the American dream, and that Americans are not innately like that. So I'm not too concerned on a long-term, from a long-term perspective. I also think that men are fickle, and especially in this world of social media, things pass as fast as they come. And one thing can be super popular today and it will be gone tomorrow. And I think that as painful as it sometimes is, we have to rely on the passage of time.
Mm-hmm. The last thing you said indicates that you're optimistic.
Oh, I'm very optimistic, yes, about everything, mostly.
Mm-hmm. Chloe, how racist is America right now?
Ooh, you just threw that out there. Not racist at all, I think, by and large.
Not racist at all.
No.
How come I hear all the time that America is a racist, bigoted country, and it is despicable?
I think you're watching the wrong people. I think you're reading the wrong things.
What would your father say?
I think he would agree with me.
America is not racist.
No, America's not racist.
Well, just for the record, I agree with you.
Okay.
The only difference is
yes.
I'm not African American.
Okay.
In some way, I don't feel I have the right to say it.
Okay.
It's what I feel, though.
Okay.
And I feel those who are trying to say America is racist
okay. are
bending the story for political reasons.
I think that's fair to a certain extent. I think that, I don't think that the people who are vocal are necessarily in the majority. That's another issue that keeps coming up in this, again, world of social media.
It's always true, right?
Yeah, right.
It's
absolutely.
always true.
Absolutely. I think, look, I have a lot of opinions about some of the race-based ideologies that are part of the zeitgeist for some reason now in 2017 that I could go into and sort of try to unpack philosophically. But I don't think that the American people are racist, and I don't think that the spirit of America is one that is prejudiced.
Mm-hmm. Is it fair to say that it is still harder in America if one is a person of color than if one is not?
I think it's harder for a person in America if one doesn't have a family than it is for one who does. I think it's harder for a person in America if one does not have access to education than it is for someone who does. I think those are the actual greater barriers to social mobility than skin color. And I'm thinking of Booker T. Washington, who, when he wrote Up From Slavery, having just been freed from slavery, said that, I'm paraphrasing, but he said that no matter what obstacle you face, if merit exists, no matter under what skin color, anything is possible. So I'm going to take the words of a former slave over some of the people who think that we happen to live in a society that is in any way, shape, or form comparable to the era of slavery.
Okay, your work now.
Yes.
You're seeing what the college campus is like. The Jewish community is very upset and worried about BDS.
Yes.
And the extent to which it seems to attract not all young people. And by the way, BDS is not there's not a major presence on every college university. And American Jews should understand that, who are watching us right now. BDS is a problem. It is not everywhere.
Correct.
But where it is, it's problematic. Have you been on campuses personally dealing with either Jewish students who've had to deal with BDS, or have you ever dealt with those who support BDS on college campuses?
I've dealt with individuals who support BDS on a one-on-one conversational level. I've addressed students, also Jewish students, who have to deal with BDS coming to their campus. So I've dealt with both in some capacity.
What are they facing?
Well, I think it depends on the campus. When BDS comes to a campus, they're facing nights of trying to put together a series of arguments and a series of responses, because what's going to happen is BDS is going to be in a public forum and they're going to pass a vote in the student government, and so they have to prepare for that, and they have to try to make campus allies on the campus that they reside, and they have to strategically mobilize in such a way to defeat that resolution if and when it comes to their campus, which can be obviously very challenging if you are a young student and you're dealing also with schoolwork and exams and all these other various aspects of your life. It's another burden to have to deal with. So,
do they feel under assault, Jewish kids?
I would say that there is a great disparity between what many adults in the pro-Israel community think and what Jewish kids encounter on campus by and large. I think that there is a tendency, and this is something else I wrote about in the research that I did with Brett, there is a tendency to use crisis as a major mobilization factor, which is not a reflection of the true story of what's going on most campuses. And for example, you always hear about California and BDS in California. Well, in the past year, BDS activity has actually gone down 64% in California. So I think that there's often a disconnect between what organizations' goals are and what students need on a macro level, especially in this country. And I feel very strongly about this, as you can probably imagine.
Yes, I imagine there are people who don't like you saying that. You're saying
that. I wouldn't say they don't like me. I think they exist in their.
I didn't say you. They don't like you're saying it.
Perhaps. I think that what I've encountered, especially when I'm speaking in different communities at synagogues and otherwise, when I say this, a lot of the members of the audience feel optimistic and come away breathing and able to,
Good for you.
relax a bit.
Yes.
Because what I usually say to them is we have a challenge on some campuses, but by and large, the community has actually been asking the wrong questions for decades, which is, how do we defeat BDS? How do we respond to anti-Semitism on campus? How do we essentially destroy something that is horrible, right? When we should have been asking all of this time, how do we create something spectacular that is going to be so compelling emotionally and is going to move people so much that it's not that BDS will disappear, it's that BDS will become irrelevant.
It's interesting. I've said to myself, and you're a pro here. I've said to myself, maybe the Jewish attitude, the communal attitude, should be, it's not like we pretend BDS isn't there.
Right.
But our attitude almost is, how silly.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes.
It's just silly.
Joyous indifference, as Brett Stevens likes to say.
I love it. Joyous indifference.
Yes.
Okay. There are those who say Israel is an apartheid state. That's part of the BDS mantra.
Right.
I go to Colombia. I'm covering Denny Danon, Israel's ambassador to the United Nations, is speaking at a Jewish gathering, but the Jewish gathering is open to
Right.
campus.
Right.
And I do some interviews before Danon gets there.
Mm-hmm.
And I've got kids in yarmulkes explaining to me that they're there to protest Danon. Danon comes in. He's a lovely, lovely guy.
Yeah.
Speaks very, very well.
Mm-hmm.
Every 4 minutes, almost was as if somebody has a stopwatch.
Right.
At a different part of the auditorium, 5 people stand up. They got signs, and they're chanting things like, "From the river to the sea, Palestine will be free."
Yeah.
And Danon says to his last group, "Don't leave. Stay with me."
Yeah.
Please stay for the Q&A. I want to listen to you.
Talk to me.
Yeah.
Argue with me. Tell me what you feel. Let me answer you.
Yeah.
Last group gets up, from the river to the sea, out they go. And I'm watching what is, in my mind, mindlessness. One can have differing views on issues.
Right.
But I find the positions that BDS takes to be factually, emotionally ludicrous. But one of the things it's said all the time is Israel is an apartheid state for the way it treats Palestinians on the West Bank, Judea, Samaria. Chloé, what do you say when you hear people say Israel is an apartheid state?
So I was actually in South Africa a month ago.
Were you- First trip, second?
First trip. First trip to Africa and first trip to South Africa.
Was it wonderful for you?
Incredible.
In a different way.
In all of the ways.
But it's not the same as going to Israel.
It's similar, actually.
Oh, tell us how.
It's
Tell us how.
It's similar. It's similar. And I actually read one of Steve Biko's books, The Father of Black Consciousness, before going to sort of prepare myself for that trip. I was there for a 2-week speaking tour. And I went all the way, like everywhere, from Johannesburg to Durban and Cape Town.
When you get off the plane, do you have any of the same sensation that either a Jew or even you had getting off the plane at Ben Gurion?
Well, I'm not exactly sure what a Jew feels when he gets off of a plane at Ben Gurion, but
I'm home.
I certainly felt it was familiar. I think I felt familiarity in both places. I think I felt familiarity in Africa in a different way than I felt it in Israel, but both places sort of exude this familiar sense.
Were you comfortable there?
I was comfortable. Yeah, I was comfortable.
And it was wonderful.
It was wonderful. Yeah.
Okay, I interrupted you. You hear somebody say Israel's an apartheid state, and lo and behold, you just went to South Africa.
Yeah, I was in South Africa.
Keep going.
And so in touring the country and speaking with a lot of native South Africans who experienced apartheid and going to the Apartheid Museum as well in Johannesburg, and having to physically, I don't know if you've ever been to the Apartheid Museum in Johannesburg, but the way you walk in is it has the signs European colored, and according to your skin color, you go in whichever one, is designated for you. And so having that experience and speaking with individuals, native South Africans who are actually a part of the pro-Israel space in South Africa, who themselves experienced apartheid, I usually say, to people that you may have valid political disagreements with the Israeli government's treatment of Palestinians, but to call it apartheid is not only flawed, but insensitive to the very real struggles that Black South Africans experience. And furthermore, apartheid is a very specific system of oppression that is based on skin color. And we in the pro-Israel community make this mistake as well, by the way. We say, we look at Iran and we see Iran throwing people off roofs because of their sexual orientation or because of their gender, and we say apartheid, but that's also not apartheid. Apartheid is a very specific system of oppression, and I think that if again, as responsible individuals who care about the enrichment of others, we don't want to and we don't need to trivialize other people's experiences. So that's usually what I say, and I actually said that recently to someone, and I said to them, I'm telling you this from a place of love, not from a place of, contention, and I hope you hear me, and I think he heard me. So that's usually what I say, and usually it's received well in my experience. But also I think obviously having that personal experience of actually going to South Africa and being there is powerful.
Absolutely. The first time we spoke, it was because you had written about Black Lives Matter.
Mm-hmm.
And again, I talked about the Jewish African-American experience.
Right.
There is something the Jew finds both ironic and in some way it's a betrayal
Okay.
of the relationship.
Okay.
Because there are many Jews who stand with Black Lives Matter
Yes.
on the issue of the extent to which there are times
Yes.
in which, whether it's the police or
Right.
the system,
Right.
does seem to be disproportionately oppressive to the African American.
Right.
But then Black Lives Matter adds
Mm-hmm.
that, and this intersectionality business, that if you are sympathetic to Black Lives Matter,
Mm-hmm.
then you're sympathetic to all forms of oppression,
Right.
especially people of color, and Israel is oppressing the Palestinian,
Right.
and therefore Black Lives Matter, Black Lives Matters also
Mm-hmm.
is anti-Israel, pro-Palestinian,
Mm-hmm.
and you and I spoke about that when you were in the news, and I'm asking you to speak about it again.
Okay.
The extent to which, how do you react, and how would you have the Jewish community understand
Mm-hmm.
why Black Lives Matter,
Mm-hmm.
Black Lives Matter, would be anti-Israel, pro-Palestinian?
Well, first of all, I think I need to point out that there's a distinction between Black Lives Matter, the formal organization, and individuals such as myself who identify with the fact that Black Lives Matter. Because there are plenty of people online who will tweet out #Black Lives Matter with no understanding of what the formal organization actually stands for, or its sort of creed and its mission and its platform, which, as you know, it came out with past August. But I think the whole business of Black Lives Matter, the formal organization being anti-Israel, is just a reflection of its shallow and superficial way of thinking about the world at large. I know that many aspects of the Jewish community feel betrayed by this. I don't take them that seriously, however, to feel the same amount of betrayal, because I'm interested in arguing with them on a philosophical level and on a historical level, as opposed to simply saying, how could you come to this conclusion? And I actually debated members of Black Lives Matter, formal organization Black Lives Matter, on Al Jazeera's The Stream last year. And I said to them, look, I don't understand what this very complex, distant conflict has to do with social justice reform on the south side of Chicago. And quite frankly, you're misallocating resources and time by pointing this out and talking about something that has nothing to do with what's going on domestically. And believe it or not, the hosts themselves of this show asked the members of Black Lives Matter, do you think you went too far this time? So I think I did my job.
You did. You did.
I think I did my job, but I think you said earlier that you felt a little bit uncomfortable saying, I think you said that that you didn't believe America was a racist country because you're not African American. But I think to treat us as equal is to treat us as human beings and to take us and our ideas seriously. And if one does not take Black Lives Matter seriously, which is to say, if one does not actually wrestle with their ideas and unpack and debate and argue, then one is not actually treating the members of that group as human beings and as equals. So it is in the spirit of equality that I wrestle with a lot of the ideas, and not just the Israel part, by the way, in their platform, with a lot of the ideas that they put forth. I was recently on Salon Talks to discuss a great show on Netflix called Dear White People. It's a new series. And one of the things I said was that this show was great because it showed Black people in the fullness of our humanity. We're full of contradictions and paradoxes, etc., which is something that James Baldwin talked about. But the great irony of the show was that it showed white people mostly as though they were props. And the thing is, you can't actually demand that props take responsibility for their actions. It's only people that can take responsibility for their actions. And as it is with white people, so it is with Black people as well. So again, I'm interested in that back and forth more than any, weird, shallow statement that they make.
You're making a distinction between, again, organizational
Right.
philosophy
Right.
and the root cause
Right.
or root message. If you take the root message seriously,
Meaning that they don't stand with Israel, or that
no,
they're anti-Israel?
forget Israel now.
Okay.
Okay?
Yeah.
It sounded to me like you were saying,
Yeah.
on an organizational level, they may have gone too far and they may
Yeah.
have involved themselves in issues that they don't understand,
Right.
but that there is something at the core of Black Lives Matter that matters to you.
Yes.
Okay. And
Yes.
if that's true,
Yes.
how does that comport with your saying that you don't think America is a racist country?
Well, because I can think Black Lives Matter and also not believe that America is a racist
Black
country.
Lives Matter is predicated on the
Yes.
notion
Yes.
that America doesn't think Black Lives Matter.
Right. Which I disagree with.
Okay. So what is it about what's the message of Black Lives Matter that you do agree with?
I think it goes back to what I said earlier about the series Dear White People, which is that black people are people, and we are human beings full of the capacity to love and laugh and hurt and cry and cope. We are not stereotypes onto which projections or stereotypes can be projected onto. We're actually human beings. We're not cookie cutter objects. And so I think that the more we are seen as human beings as opposed to being dehumanized by whatever forces that exist in the world, the better our society will be. So that I agree with, but it is in the spirit of agreeing with that I demand that the organization Black Lives Matter actually live up to that. Because I think that there are contradictions in the way in which it comports itself and the way in which it develops its platform that are not actually in line with that basic fundamental truth.
When you were in Israel and you were there with ZOA on the West Bank, your Judea, Samaria.
Yes.
And I didn't ask you whether that's your last trip, and you've been there many times.
Yes. Yes.
What is your feeling about the injustice of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict? When I say injustice, that doesn't mean that's what I believe it is.
Yes.
But that's the way it is portrayed.
Yes.
That Israel is somehow an occupying colonialist.
Right.
Apartheid, we've already dealt with that.
Right.
Brutalizing presence.
Right.
That prevents Palestinians from actualizing themselves in terms of self-determination and self-nationhood. What's your view of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict?
Huge question.
Yes.
I think that these days, when I address students and they ask me a lot of these questions that deal with the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, whether it's settlements, whether it's security fences and checkpoints and things of that nature, I am much more interested in individuals asking questions than I am in individuals coming to conclusions. So, for example, I ask students, what does it mean to wrestle with the fact? And can you wrestle with the fact that if a Palestinian woman from Gaza is let into Israel proper for medical treatment, for cancer, and in the process she smuggles in, or she attempts to smuggle in bombs, can you wrestle with the fact that in this environment there is a tension between mobility for Palestinians on the one hand and security for Israelis on the other hand? And maybe I don't have the answer to how to solve that tension, but can you actually live in that tension as a thinker, as someone who understands that not everything is solvable right here and now? And can you be comfortable in that tension? Can you be comfortable in the fact that, I said earlier that I was in South Africa, and one of the interesting things about South Africa is Native South Africans also have a land issue. When I was in Johannesburg, I saw Native South Africans being arrested for trying to illegally set up homes and communities on land that had previously been taken by European invaders in former generations. And obviously, the South African government has to uphold the rule of law. But that experience gave me perspective about how attachment to land creates identity. And so when it comes to, for example, Judea and Samaria, I think that we can reasonably disagree on the legal ramifications or the political conclusions of what happens there. But again, in coming to our conclusions, I think it is our responsibility to wrestle with the fact that that land means something to Jewish people, and not merely as territory with political ramifications, but as a sacred space that actually creates cultural belonging and a sense of collective history and a common purpose. And what do you do with that? And how do you figure that out? 'Cause I don't really know all the answers to that. And I'm not going to sit here and pretend like I can answer the questions to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. But I think that if we have not wrestled with that complexity of identity, then we have not fully done our jobs.
My instinct is you're able to explain that so much better than a Jew. Because when you do it,
Yes.
you bring a credibility of a different nature. When a Jew does it, the argument is, well, you're just defending the Jew because you're a Jew. You're doing it from a larger, broader, in some ways, less biased perspective. So as I listen to you, I say to myself, well, I would just want you to go everywhere. Because life is complicated. One of the things that I mourn, Chloe, I don't feel people listen to each other anymore.
I agree.
Their mind is made up. Don't bother me. It's true of left and right, but on the left, it is. I mean, I come out of the left. I'm coming out of the liberal tradition. For me to see liberals now take a position, I don't want to listen to you. I don't want to. People will walk away if you begin to make valid points. It is very painful for me. There are people who feel the Palestinians or Palestinian leadership now is captive to an ideology. And the ideology is all the land is theirs. And they can't share it. The Jew says all the land was ours and we'll share it anyway. And the Palestinian says none of the land was yours and we won't share an inch of it. It's not about borders. Tel Aviv is as legal in the Palestinian mind as is Hebron. And for me, it's not about Israel being perfect. And you write about this. Israel's not perfect, but that's not what life is about. No one should ask any other state to be perfect. The question is there a certain justice to them? And is there a certain, do they grapple with the issues that you've described? It gives me chills. So I say to myself, this is the human tragedy. It's not because Palestinians are bad. They have them, right now they're captive to an ideology which says, it's not that I don't want to share the land with you. I can't. For you to ask me to share the land with you is a violation of who I am. Now, I don't believe most Jews get it. I don't believe the administration gets it. I don't believe most people get it. And I don't know whether you've thought of this yourself or whether I'm saying something to you that is interesting to you. But I do want to hear your reaction to it, because the extent to which I am describing the painful reality, Israel's not the culprit here. And those who go around making Israel the bad guy don't get it at all. I am not giving Israel a pass on anything they might do that I want them to do better. But they're not the cause of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. And Israel's not the reason why there is no two-state solution today. I just want to hear you react to all that.
I mean, well, I largely agree. And I was actually thinking about this on my way here on a different level and in a different way about anti-Israel, Jewish anti-Israel organizations, and how I feel about them. Because I think, not to repeat myself, but I think that, first of all, what you said is true. I think in Palestinian political culture, this idea that they are entitled to all of it and to give all of it away would be to tear out their soul, essentially. But I think, more critically for my purposes, the Jewish anti-Israel organizations that exist are not generous or as generous in their compassion for Israelis as they are for Palestinians. And I think that is also one of the great tragedies of this entire conflict. And it's not that I hate any of these people, because I don't. I actually think it's rather difficult to live one's life with such animosity and with such hatred. And I think it's actually stifling to Palestinian society ultimately. It hurts Palestinians more than it hurts Israelis to be informed and shaped by a worldview that forces you to hate another group of people. I mean, that's actually stifling. I mean, obviously, I think the question is worth asking because James Baldwin asked this question about sorry to keep, but James Baldwin asked this question in 1965 about sort of like the racist Mississippi sheriff versus the black person that he is affecting. And he said something like, the black person is physically harmed, right? But what does it say of a Mississippi racist sheriff who simultaneously is capable of hugging his wife and his children? What does it do in terms of the corruption of his soul? Like, what is that all about? You know, how deep is that? And I think that question is worth asking for a people who have been taught to hate. How much more worse is it for them than it actually is for Israelis? And I think that's the greater tragedy of this entire conflict.
I want to tell you something. You know, first of all, you blew me away the first time. That was on the phone. I am yours.
Oh, thank you so much.
You keep doing your work. There's a lot for you to do. Your message is clear. You are a lovely, articulate voice. I wish you, in Hebrew, kol tuv v'hatzlacha, only goodness and success. But this can't be the last time we were together.
Okay.
If I need you, you got to come back.
Okay.
Fair enough?
Fair enough.
Thank you, Chloe.
Toda rabah.
Thank you. Chloé Valdary, Director of Partnerships and Outreach at Jersualem U. Wow. As always, I invite you to be in touch with me with any thoughts or comments you may have to any of the ideas you heard Chloe express on this edition of L'chaim. Please email me, write me, post on our Facebook wall, or tweet me. I look forward to hearing from you. Until the next time, I'm Mark Golub. L'chaim, my friends, to life.
L'chaim is a presentation of Jewish education in media.
We would be pleased to send a complimentary DVD of this program to anyone who wishes to support JBS, the Jewish Broadcasting Service, with a tax-deductible gift of $36, double chai or more, to the nonprofit organization Jewish Education in Media. Simply visit the JBS homepage and click on the Donate button to make a donation by PayPal or your credit card. And please indicate the program for which you would like a DVD. Or you can send your tax-deductible check made out to Jem, Post Office Box 180, Riverdale Station, Bronx, New York 10471. And again, please remember to indicate which program you would like to receive with our compliments. And we thank you for your kind support.